I am going to record. I'm recording now.
Okay.
And then I will share desktop. And then I'm going to get me a console going. And I'm going to open two. So one of them I can run the server in. So I would go to your sandbox file. If you have that, and I'll open up Sublime and my sandbox test, and I'll go ahead and run the server here. So that's running.
So test app, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the one we should. Yeah, yours won't look exactly like mine, but I think we got a hello controller in there. Yeah. And I think, yeah, we will have a task controller too, because if you remember last time we used scaffolding to create a task model. Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Okay, so week 3, we're talking about routes. So the sort of bare minimum you need for sort of within a Rails app for this sort of request response cycle is the route, action, and view. And again, just to review, and, you know, this one's a little more detailed, but if we go up here again, browser makes a request to the Rails app, checks to see if it's a valid route. So if it is, then it sends it on to the controller. Controller finds the action, passes the action on to the associated view, and then the response gets made back to the browser. And again, that's this sort of triangle here, leaving the model out. The model part is optional, but at a minimum, you sort of need these 3, browser, controller, and view. And sort of same thing here. This is just a little more detailed view of that. So again, route, action, and view. Okay. So one of the things he did, so to start to look at that, is we can add a specific route to, we can add a specific route for demo hello, the demo controller, the hello action, and let's see what we've got. So right now in our hello controller, at least I've only got an index action, and so let's make sure that stays open, and then let me pull up my routes. So, and you notice we've got this hello index here. So we could also add a route. Let's see what I said here. Add a route for demo hello. With action and view default. Okay, so I think let's do this. Let's add a specific. So let's add a specific route for a new action. So again, I think the idea here is we use scaffolding to create this for us last time. We're just going to manually create each piece of this just so we can sort of see it, happen. So if I do hello blarg, right, I've created a new action. In fact, it might be interesting to just take this one step at a time and actually see what that route does, because so in this case, we've got a route, so we're not going to get a routing error because it's valid, but I think we'll probably get a action error, but let me load my. It's down here. I can see it. Okay, so I can go. If I just do hello, okay, yeah. I didn't know if Rails would default, if it may be. Sometimes it'll do, and he sort of talks about that in the video. There's a lot of these little hidden things Rails will do for you that you don't always know. I didn't know if it would maybe default to an index action, but obviously it does not. So we know our index view should work. That works. So I added a route for blarg. So if we put that in, right. So we're not getting a routing error. Like if we were to get a routing error, if I do maybe just fat finger something, right? So we get a no route if the route is bad. In this case, we have a valid route, but there's no action associated with that route. So let's go do that. So now we'll go inside of our hello controller and we'll create a blarg action. And it's just as simple as that. That's going to give us a valid action. So now we'll go back and refresh and let's see how far we get. Okay, good. So we made it one step further, no template. So hello controller blarg is missing a template. So what do you think we need to do to fix that?
So what that's saying here is that the the route is working. It just ain't
Route
got
is
nothing to
working.
show up.
Well, but
Nothing to render.
well, the route is working, and then we fix that by adding an action. So the action or the controller action is working, but so now we're on to the view. And again, just thinking about this, thinking about, you know, this
triangle there. Yeah. Okay.
and really this triangle here. So
Yeah.
browser, we added a route. That worked. We added a controller, and now we're on to this view. It's looking for this view. So to fix that, what do we need to do?
Well, we got to build a view for it.
Yep. So we'll go to apps, views. This is our hello controller. So we'll go in here and we'll create a new file, and we'll call this file what?
blarg.html.erb.
Exactamundo.html.erb. And then we'll say made it to blarg view. Save that. Now we'll go back to our, again, we're on this hello blarg route, refresh that, and boom. So we've got a complete request response cycle here. We added each one of those three pieces. Let's go back down. Okay, so we did that, yeah. Any questions about that? And again, Rails just sort of has this hardwired in, right? Now what we're going to see now is we're going to sort of change this up. We're going to sort of change this default, again, that default triangle of routes, controller, view, and then response. By default, based on naming convention, Rails puts all that together. But again, Rails has mechanisms in place to allow us to modify that. So let's look at the render command. So let's see, in the controller, add render. Okay, so let's do, let me grab this. Let's go back to our controller. All righty. So what we can do is, by default, if we call the hello blarg route, the blarg action is called, and then that is passed on to the blarg view. Well, we can change that default behavior by doing something like this. And looking at that in the color coding, that tells me that may not be right. Let me make sure I got that right. Let's do this and see what we get. So now I'm gonna go back to our app, refresh that. Demo, okay, yeah. So in this case, again, I just sort of made notes from and in the video, he's using a demo controller. We need to modify this to our controller. So we could pass this. We may try something with the task controller I've got here, but let's just stick with what we've got here. And let's do hello. And it would be hello slash, and then let's just call blarg to make sure that works. Again, based on the coloring I'm seeing here, that makes me think, okay, and in fact, I can see at least one thing. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Anytime you write single quotes,
all right,
and copy those in, it doesn't, it gives you like forward and reverse single quotes. So the reason that didn't look right is because this syntax. Yeah, but you can see now when I put straight up single quotes inside the editor, the color coding looks right. Okay, so we should see the typical same action. Go ahead.
Line 6 has a typo there with the hello slash.
Ah, there you go. All right. So again, nothing's changed here. Made it to blarg view, but let's send it to the index and let's see what happens. All righty. So now notice I'm going to the index view. So what's happening here? Again, thinking about our triangle thinking about our triangle here, browser, we're making a request to hello blarg. That takes us to the blarg action inside our hello controller. At that point, the blarg action says, hey, I want you to render the hello index template. So that's actually sending us up to the hello, to the index template, which is this, okay? So that's just showing that, again, Rails sort of has its default convention for how things works, but we can always go in and switch that up if we want to. And then also, yeah, it had a shorthand there. He made note of that you could actually just do, if you do this, let's make sure it works. So make sure I'm not lying before we say that it works. Yeah. So you can do just this shorthand. You can leave the controller name out. It will default based on the current controller you're in, rather than being explicit about that controller. You can just leave the controller name off, which brings up the point though. Let's try that. I wanted to try that. We've got a task controller here too, right? So can we redirect from one controller to another? Let's try, let's do the index action of the task controller and see what that does. So let's do, so what we can do is task here. So I'm curious to see what this does. I mean, I got a feeling it may not work, and I think I know why, but it'll be interesting to see. Yep. Missing template task index.
Is it plural or singular? I mean, would it because
it
like
should be singular.
controller,
Yeah, it should be singular. Well, no, actually, I think you're right. Yeah, you're right. Because did let me see what my notes said. Interesting. Demo, I mean, the only thing that's I'm wondering about that is because like demo wasn't, the examples he used weren't plural, so I'm not sure. Task control, but I think, you know what? Yeah, hello. We actually named it tasks. We named it task controller, so that's why, right? So that actually makes sense. I mean, it's not a singular versus plural thing. It has to be the name of the controller you want to call. Now, the reason that this doesn't work though, or the reason there's an issue when it loads, is because it doesn't know what at task. And now we're going to talk about that. And again, you watched the video on global variables. Even though we're calling a controller from another, or yeah, even though we're calling an action from another controller, it doesn't have any context for that specific controller. So that's why that's failing, because if we go to our task controller, there's an at tasks global, or not global, very instance of a variable, and it doesn't know what that is. And you sort of can't take, in this case, you can't take this action in a, you can't put it in a bubble and just call it all by itself. It needs the context of the larger controller. In this case, the before action here, the before action is what actually sets these at tasks. And if we look at the before action set task, we go down here and notice set task actually sets the specific task in this case. And so that's why it doesn't know what tasks are.
So
now,
the link works, but the view doesn't know that because it doesn't have anything to show, because everything's encapsulated inside of here.
Yeah, and in fact, if I do, I'm just curious, if I do def boo, and then we go back and call boo. So let's do task boo. I think that'll work. Now it's not going to do anything because we're not telling it to do anything. And okay, same thing here. Well, let's make it work. So then what would we need to do? What would be our next step to try and make this work based on this error you're seeing here?
So if I recall correctly from our little triangle, what we've done is we've gone through the route. So we've linked a route, we've reached into the controller. So now we've got to get a view to show.
We've got to get a view associated with that boo tasks. Right. And
but go into that tasks folder.
We need to go into views tasks, right? And then we would want
make a boo.html.erb folder. I'm sorry, file.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could put some text in there, and that should make it all jive.
refresh. Yep. See, so that
Yeah,
all
okay.
that all worked.
So we're closing that triangle.
Yeah, we're closing that loop and making it all work nice. And so again, it works. So again, I think the point is there. And again, we'll talk about instance variables in a bit here. But the reason that index action wouldn't work for us is because again, we've got an instance variable here that again, without the context of the entire controller, we're in another controller entirely. We're trying to call this task that's in this other controller. You just have to be careful. Again, we saw that by creating this boo action and view, you can do it, but you just, there's caveats there.
Yeah, it answers a question to a previous project that I was working on.
Okay.
Well, at least it puts some context around why I can't get the view to show. Now it's
Okay. Yeah.
figure out how to get that thing working. So,
right. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about redirect. So we can also do redirect. So rather than calling actions necessarily, we can redirect based on routes or URLs. And so here the convention here is the redirect to method. And this is just a method that Rails gives us, and then it takes two arguments, in this case, a controller and an action. Okay, so let's try. I'm gonna go ahead and let's go ahead and close that.
and what's an example of when I would use the redirect? Is
so render is
like a 404.
Well, and that's actually a good question. I don't recall. I don't recall him making a distinction necessarily between the two. I'm sure he did. And right offhand, nothing's coming to mind. I don't know. Let's insert it here and let's just see.
Well, so like you and me were talking about authentication. So if you get to a login page and you haven't logged in yet, you click the login link, but you don't have an account built. You redirect to like a login page.
Yeah, and that's probably that's probably a good use case. And I'm just trying to think, like, could you use a render in that same context? And I'm just not sure about that. I'm curious to see. Let's do the same thing. Let's do something similar to what we did for. Let's try this. So if we do tasks and then index, wonder if we get any different result here. Yeah, let's just see than what we did previously. Hello control line 7. What did I miss? Oh yeah, same thing here. That doesn't like those ticks.
Does it need a colon after that?
No, it just it was just that quote thing, the single quotes I talked about earlier. When you paste it from a Word document or like a Google document, it doesn't. Okay, I'm still getting the syntax error. Why am I getting? All right, yeah, I need a colon. I think that's what you were saying. Yeah, I need a colon here. So got a slightly different result. If you remember earlier, we tried to redirect to that task's action, and it would not allow us to do it, but redirect to does. And I think this sort of context piece that I talked about is a part of why this is a redirect. Gives you sort of the other stuff. So in this case, remember we talked about that the at task instance variable is there.
Yeah, right.
So the redirect sort of gives you that context of instance variables working as opposed to the render does not. And I think it's purely a view thing. I think what's happening with render is really all we're doing is rendering this task view. I mean, in some ways, my sense is it's just sort of skipping over the controller code and taking you straight to the view, whereas redirect is actually sending you to the controller, and then the associated view is being rendered.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right, view templates and ERB. So let's talk about ERB. So we talked about ERB. We've talked about that some at this point as far as it being embedded Ruby. So we'll actually see that. I don't think we've actually embedded any Ruby yet inside of our code. So let's do that now. So for instance, I'm going to take this and let's see. Let's go back to our. Let's go ahead and use our Boo view, and so let's go back to Boo, and let's paste this in. Now again, what embedded Ruby allows us to do, and that's the sort of ERB. And he makes a good point in the or he made a point that I wasn't. I'm not sure I was 100% aware of, which is not all Ruby. It's not quite pure Ruby. It's ERB. So generally, most things Ruby work inside these templates, but apparently, at least according to what he's saying, it's not 100% Ruby. So yeah, you have to be careful about that. ERB is not equivalent to Ruby. And I mean, if you remember, like, what does that mean? If you remember, we used IRB in the and in our terminal window, and we experimented with some Ruby there. Not necessarily everything you do inside IRB, would work inside of an ERB template. Now we haven't worked. I don't think we've done anything with the Rails console yet, but the Rail, I think I'm on safe ground saying that anything you do inside the Rails console should work inside of a view because you're doing it, in the context of Rails. Okay. So here's our Boo view, and if let's go back, hello index should now be rendering the Boo view. Say that 5 times fast. And let me make sure we're right. I feel like we should be seeing the Boo. Okay, blarg is what we need. So let's do hello blarg. All right, Boo view here. Now notice we're not seeing anything, and the reason that is that little equal sign. And so key thing to remember is that all this does is executes Ruby code, but it doesn't display it. To display it, we have to have this equal sign here. Now, why would you ever want to execute code and not display it? Well, we'll see in a second here. We'll do a loop, and you'll see certain parts of it. We're going to want to. All we want is the logic that Ruby is giving us. We don't want to actually display anything, and in other parts of it, we're going to want to actually display the result. So in this case, just adding this equal sign here actually makes it display inside of our view. So when we do that, we notice we get our 2 here. Let's stick a BR tag in here. Okay. So let's make it. So let's talk about variables too. So we can do something like this. So here we're creating a target variable, and we're setting that equal to the string. And let's make sure this is right. The string world. And then we're going to actually display, and so we'll need equal sign here, right? Because we want it to, in fact, we'll leave it this way now, just so we can see.
Yeah, but so like with the string interpolation here,
right?
What should be inside of that? Should it be world or should it be target? Because
and it's actually not.
Variable,
yeah, right? I thought I copied that from what they were doing, but yeah, you're right. It should be target, not. And again, the color coding is giving me pause.
Well, so the whole thing's got to be double quoted, right? So the whole string, hello.
Okay,
right? So
that's
you got to have
actually,
double
yeah.
quotes around the whole
Yep.
thing because it only.
And there we go. I feel better about that. Yep, right. Then you'll see single and double quotes, and generally they're interchangeable. I say most of the time, although just depends on what you're embedding inside. Sometimes if you have quotes inside of
Okay.
quotes, then that's when you run into some squirreliness. But let's just give this a try and see. Now, this is not going to change anything. Again, we don't have the equal sign here, but I just want to just sort of sanity check by loading that. Okay, nothing happens. So now if we add our equal sign here, and then we display that. So hello target. So something's not quite right here, right?
Yeah.
We know that
I
it's
I
just taking
remember
that as a
reading.
pure string.
Yeah, I remember reading double quotes for interpolation.
And in fact, yeah, let's get that. I mean, I've got another solution, I think, but let's just try double quotes there. And yep, here you go. So
Yeah,
that's one of those differences with sort of single versus double quotes. You could do single quotes if you're not interpreting any variables, but as you said, using interpolation inside there, yeah, we want to use double quotes. And I mean, the other thing I was going to say is we could probably do something like hello like this, and then we could do that, I think. Yeah, I think that should work. Yeah, so notice we got the same thing there, just using the plus sign as a concatenator. Okay. And again, these are, these are sort of two separate lines of Ruby code, right? One is creating this variable target, setting it equal to the string world, and then this other one is we're displaying, the string hello along with the variable target, which translates to the text world. And if we, and let's just do a BR tag to give us some separation there. I was going to say something else. Oh yeah, I'm just curious if we put an equal sign up here, what do we get? Yeah, okay. So notice, right, we get the result of, this operation of creating a variable target and assigning the text world to it. The sort of return statement is, okay, I'm gonna, and you can think about if we were in the IRB, if we were in the console and we created a variable and assigned text string, the sort of the return response we get back is the variable that you created. So that's why we're actually seeing world here. But again, in this case, we'd want to do something like that and just leave the equal sign off. And we've got that. Okay. All right, let's do, let's get a little more sophisticated. And let's do, trying to think if we did this, if he did this example in the view, or yeah, I think he did. So let's go to our view. So all right, so let's do another BR tag. It's just, I think the way he did it is a good, just to show that you can put it all inside one line. So he had puts in. So remember, the put statement is just a output, or just tells Ruby to display the result on in the view and end. So something like that. Yeah, so let's see. So I suspect we're not going to see anything here, which we don't, but, and he shows us this in the video. Notice if we go to our console, we actually do see the output here. So yeah, I think he used this as an example of, like, not all Ruby is Ruby inside of an ERB template. There are some restrictions on what the ERB template will do. versus just sort of straight
Yeah.
Ruby. So in this case, the puts command is not executed. I think the right way to say it is the puts command is not executed inside the view. Now in this case, in the context of Rails, it is going to send it to the console for us. And this is a pretty common way in Rails. I do it all the time. If you're debugging and you sort of quickly want to see the output of a variable or something like that, you can do a puts to see that. So we can see in this case puts outputs to the console. Now the way we can fix that is by going here, and then the example he used, and this is generally the way you would sort of code it up in a real app too, is each one of these lines would be a separate Ruby statement, you know, or execution. So I'd do something like this, and here we could just do in, and we just need our equals because this is the variable that we actually want to display, and then we would just do an in statement here, something like that. Now this should give us inside our view. We're going to see 0, 1, 2. Okay. All righty. Any questions on that? I think it's
No, but thanks for walking through that. Yeah, it's straightforward, but thanks for walking.
Okay. So now let's talk about instance variables. So our instance variables have the @ symbol in front of them. We saw these some with our task controller. You notice we see a lot of these sort of @ task, in this case @ task, but you could do any variable like this. And essentially what the instance variable does, that @ sign, is makes the variable available to you inside the view. And so for instance, let's remove this redirect just so we don't have any ambiguity. Well, I don't know, it'll be interesting to just try it and see. So for instance here, if I do a I'm going to say var1 equals, here is some text, right? And then if I go to, again, here in this case, we're going to be rendering task. I don't know if this is going to work, so we'll see. But if I go down here and I try to render var1, and the reason I say I'm not sure if it's going to work, we're sort of mixing up mixing up actions here, so I'm not sure. So I know for sure that this is not going to work. But let's just redirect our view just so we can see. Okay, so in fact we do, right? We do get an error here. In this case, undefined local variable var1, right? So when we load this view, the Rails app is telling us, hey, I don't know what this
is, man. Yeah.
I don't know what this var1 is. Yeah. And so now, yeah. So if we do @ and I don't think this is going to work because again, we're in the context here, we're in the blarg controller, but because we're redirecting to task boo, we'd need to be, I think we would need to do this, and that's what we'll do to test it out. But I think we need to do this inside the boo action of the task controller, not this blarg controller. But let's just do it here just so we can see it. So if we do that, yep, still undefined local variable. So let's take and move this.
So do you put the @ sign in that boo HTML file though?
You actually, I think you do. You're right there. I think it's just still going to fail, but yeah, let's do it and see. Yeah.
Yeah, the color's not letting you go there.
Okay, no, it did not. No, it worked.
Yeah, okay.
That was a good catch. Yeah. Okay. So here we can see. Close this. Yeah, I'm sort of surprised that worked, but again, I think. Yeah, I think in this case, just based on the empirical experiment we're doing here, that we're in the context of the blarg controller. So any instance variables that are set there, are still accessible to us inside the view. And it sort of does make sense because if you remember, before, when we tried to do this, we tried to do it with the index view. And remember we said it's sort of skipping the controller part of the code that it's being redirected to. It's just purely the view part.
Yeah,
So I think
right.
that's probably why that works. And in this case, we're still, even though we're displaying a view that's in another action, because we're using render. Now, my sense is if we try to do this redirect with this same thing, that it would not work. Okay. So let's make this a little more sophisticated. So let's just do, let's put a BR tag in here. And he does an array. So for instance, if we add that to our action. So this is a simple array inside Ruby. In this case, we've got 5 elements. And over in our action, we can loop through this. So we can say, I think we should be able to say at array do in. Again, yes, we're going to do all of, we're going to do this should display all of the elements for us. So instead of saying this 1, 2, 3, we should see 1 through 5. Okay, nope, not quite. Counter syntax there, so I didn't do something quite right. Let's see, array, how about dot each? Do. There we go. So now we've got our 1 through 5 here.
Okay.
And that's just a little, I mean, 3 dot times do that. That's just, that tells us how many times we want to iterate, as opposed to array dot each says, okay, for every element in this array, we're going to loop through it. So again, the bigger point there is this array, this @ sign gives us access to what's going on in the controller, and sort of allows us to pass variables back and forth between the controller and view. There'll be times when you only want to do, you won't want, this var, you may want something like var1 where it's not an instance variable if you're just trying to do some logic inside the controller. And generally that's the right way to do it. You don't want, and then that's when we start to think about this separation of concerns. If the view doesn't need access to it, then it shouldn't have access to it. So in this case, if it's just some logic I'm trying to do inside the controller, and then maybe the last result that I'm going to calculate is what I'm going to actually pass over to the view, then these should all be just local variables, so they don't have the @ sign.
Yeah.
And that way, those variables, that you can only access them within that controller action, and then the view doesn't have any access to them. And then if I do have a variable that I want to be able to pass on to the view to be able to display, then we use that @ sign.
So the instance is only controllers and views. I can't go from controller to controller with an instance variable.
That is correct. Now there may be, at least in the context of what we're doing now, there may be some options in redirect that we could do, and there are ways to do that. But again, just for the context of what we're doing now, I think they're trying
Is
to
that
think
like
of.
considered like a bad practice?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. There are times when if you're doing that, then you should sort of think to yourself, because you do have to jump through some hoops to make that happen. So, right, it's the kind of thing where you say, okay, if I'm having to sort of go outside the Rails convention to do things, then am I really doing this the right way?
Yeah, if I'm working this hard, then there's got to be a better way or an easier
Right,
way to do it.
right. And that's, I mean, there's that's the whole thing of just knowing the framework well enough to know when it's the right time to break the rules to do something. But if you're constantly breaking the rules, then it's at some point it's like I may need to rethink how we're doing this.
Yeah, and I think that's, as I brought up earlier, the instance variable kind of, you showed me something that helped me solve a problem on a different app that I'm working on, I really think the issue is I'm trying to shift one instance variable to another controller, and it's just breaking everything.
Oh yeah, yeah. And there's times I run into that all the time where you're you're sort of shuffling variables around between controllers and actions. And again, when you get into that state, then you should probably take a step back and think about refactoring, or sort of again think about how you're solving a problem. Okay, the last thing they covered was was links in general. Just go ahead and grab these three. So the convention here, again, link to is just, it's a Rails method, takes two arguments, a text. First argument is going to be the text that you want to actually display or see inside the view. And then the second argument is the target where you're going to send, or when you click the link, where that's going to send you to. And then you've got a simple href too. So let's look at these. Save that. Let's make sure this works. I didn't change anything. Okay. So this is our boo. Let's do the R. Okay. And let's fix a couple of these. Okay, let's just see what we get out of the box here. So Rails is nice that way in the feedback it gives you. If a route is not right, that's one of the first things it checks. The page will immediately display an error, which is nice. I mean, you can imagine a scenario where you've got links in that maybe they don't, you don't see that they're broken until you actually click on them. So it's nice to it's nice that when you even load the page where a link is at, if the route is bad, then it'll go ahead and throw an error. So in this case, link to another action, undefined local variable hello. Okay, that makes sense. So again, it's verifying the action in here needs to be one within the context of the view that we're in. And just for kicks, let's do boo and see if that fixes it. And the other thing is, I think this blarg is going to fail too. But again, it errors out. It sort of starts from the top down, so it errored out on that first one. So, well, it still doesn't like boo. So we are in the
in that action.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what that does. No route. Hello controller. Boo. Okay. So again, we're starting to all of our redirect sort of tips and tricks are starting to bite us in the butt a little bit here, because in this case, it's saying that I can't find an action boo inside the hello controller. So let's see if we can trace our steps back. We're calling hello blarg. So the hello controller blarg, and then we're rendering task boo. And then inside task boo, we're trying to call action boo. And because we're in a different action now, I wonder if we could pass a controller in here. And let's see, boo lives inside the task controller. So I wonder if we could do comma that. I'm just trying to guess here. Okay, let's see, no action. Okay, right. Well, so let's go to our task controller. So I thought we had a boo. We've got a boo action. No route. Okay. So in this case, yeah, we'd need a route. Well, let's just fix it and see what it does. So let's do, so this is going to be tasks, and then boo. Okay, that worked. So again, it was just looking for a route there. I'm just trying to reconcile in my mind. So again, in this case, just because it's a valid action, and even though you have a view associated with that valid action, without a valid route that's associated with it, then it's just, it's just not going to work. So sometimes you have to go in and manually do those things to fix it. And in fact, that does make sense. Let's go to our routes. Notice we use this resources tasks, and since we use scaffolding to create the tasks controller, model view and controller, we use scaffolding to do that. By default, Rails uses this resources route method. That gives you the 7 routes, those 7 default routes that are in the task controllers. Remember, we talked about index, show, new task, edit. So all of those were included. That's why those just sort of work out of the box. But now, since we added this new route, this new action, this new custom action that's not a part of the default 7 actions, then yeah, we had to go in and create an explicit or a custom route for it. So in this case here, and as I hover over this, you notice if you look down at the bottom here, you can see demo hello, I think is a valid route for us. If we click that, then that kicks us back, but no, oh well, okay, yeah. So this is not going to work because remember, demo is what he used. We need, let's try hello controller index maybe. I think we can't do blar because I think we get caught in a redirect loop.
Yeah, we get sucked into the vortex.
We can do it. Yeah, we can do it just to see it. I think it'll air out. It's not like it's going to keep spinning its wheels. But let's go to so let's see. Demo hello. So we need to change okay, this one. So hello controller. Yeah, index should work. Let's just do blarg kicks. I imagine it's going to give us a redirect. Okay, no, it does take us right back to this page. So that's what's happening. It's just taking us right back to this page.
Yeah,
and
we're going right back to the
stopping
same
there.
page we're on.
Yeah. So we'll modify this and say hello index, and that should take us back to the index. Hello index page. So let's reload that, and then we go there. Now we're in the hello index page. Go. Okay. And then another page. So we'll go ahead and stop there because I want to give us at least give us 10 minutes to talk about our authentication. So we'll finish up chapter 3. There's maybe 3 or 4 more sections in the video that I did not watch. So let's chat about chat about authentication some. So let's see. Did you have time to look at Auth from scratch any or
I
code
did not.
anything up?
I didn't look it all from scratch at all.
Okay. I think I put in Slack that I want to pull up that the article that I pasted. Here it is. Yeah. So we can look at So we looked at devise last time. That devise is a gem, and we very quickly, within a few minutes, basically just added that gem to our Rails app. And in a few short minutes, we had some basic authentication in place. Okay, pretty cool. The downside there is as we go to, as we get more sophisticated with maybe our authentication and our user model, then that's when the challenges start to come, because again, you're using a gem that's sort of designed out of the box to do one certain thing, and we know for a fact we're going to want to modify our user model. So right out of the gate, we know we're going to want to change that convention. And I actually think it's not too hard. I think all we need to do is go into the migration file for the user, and if you notice inside that, in fact, I think we added it to this app here. Did I close Sublime? I think I might have. I think we added it to our app here. Let's see, migrate. Yeah, devise. I think all we need to do to get those other fields is go in and add those fields here. That's not the hardest part. Getting the database is actually pretty easy. The view is the more difficult part. And so essentially, when we go to that sign up page, let's go here, and then I think it was user sign up. We're already logged in, so we need to log out. Sign out. And now let's go to sign up. So then you've got to generate views. So like, for instance, by default, this view we're seeing now, it's not anywhere. You can't find it inside Rails, right? If I go to app view.
Yeah, there's no that's what I was scratching my head.
I go to app view,
How
right?
do I go find this?
Hello layout, all our stuff that we create is there, but there's no devise. So there's a command for the gem that you have to run. And it's not just that simple. You have to say specifically that, in fact, this is the registration view. So I think there's a special command just to get the registration views. And then even after you do that, there's a bunch of hoops you have to jump through to get access to those specific variables on the user model. So a lot of that stuff is buried fairly deep. And so that's the challenge. That's the con part of it. The pros are pretty easy to set up and get going out of the box. The cons are, again, when you start to change the sort of default off the shelf behavior of devise, that's when you run into issues. So auth from scratch was generally called auth from scratch is another way to go. And in this case, essentially, we're going to code up all of our own authentication code. So let's just walk through it real quick. In this case, they're going to walk us through creating a Rails app from scratch. So we're creating a new Rails app. So here we're going to generate our user model. So we're just creating, essentially, think about from a database standpoint, we're just going to create a user table. In this case, we're going to create username and then password digest, which is going to actually be the encrypted password. For our purposes, though, again, when we think about the additional fields that we want to get, GitHub user profile, homepage, all the other things that we get when a new recruit, somebody signs up for Betsu Code, we would capture, we would add attributes for all those things here. We create a user class that's associated with, by default, when we do this Rails G model, in addition to the database stuff that's going to happen, it's going to create this user class for us. We're going to manually add the bcrypt gem. If you remember, bcrypt was when we added devise by default, devise is built on top or uses bcrypt for its authentication, I think, and the hashing part to hash the password. So we're going to manually add that. We're going to run db:/migrate. That's going to actually create the user database table for us. Here we're going to use, so we've done this before. We're going to generate some controller code. We're going to generate a controller. We're going to create a user's controller that's going to be work in tandem with our user model that we created, because again, from a naming convention standpoint, they're both called user. So we're going to create a user controller, and then we're going to add 2 actions, in this case, new and create. And then we're going to also create a sessions controller. And then that's going to we're going to create new, create, and welcome actions there. We got some route stuff we're going to do. Again, we have to have valid routes for all of this controller code that we're creating. Here's our views. So in this case, this is the sign up page. So user enters their username and then password. Okay. Sessions page. Yeah, session page works in tandem with that sign up form to actually create a session when the user logs in. Here we can have our login and sign up links. Notice they're using link to. We talked about that link to method today. So those are just those sign up and login links.
Right.
Here's the actions, specific actions inside our user controller. More views, the welcome screen view. This is our session controller that creates a cookie for us when the user logs in. We've got to have a cookie there. So as you go from page to page, you're not being asked to log in each time. And so when we look at this manually, we see the advantage of devise. Devise is taking care of all these things for us. Okay, and that's basically it. But again, the advantage here is going to be we've got total control over how all this works, and we don't have to worry about the nuances of devise and all the little things we have to know if we want to modify something. Also, when you think about from a scalability standpoint, or I shouldn't say from a scalability standpoint, because devise is very scalable. From a long-term maintenance, I guess, standpoint, devise has updates to the gems, and sometimes you're using this gem and that gem, and well, devise is not up to date with this gem. That can be issues there. Now, I will say devise is very well maintained, and that's generally not a problem. In fact, it's usually on other gems that if devise is not working with it, it's usually maybe the other gem's problem, not devises, because it's a very well maintained gem. But that's the sort of pros and cons. What are your thoughts on which of these we should use?
So I'm all about Auth from scratch.
Yeah.
2 reasons. First of all, like, let's do it, man. Right. So we can see like the real inner workings, because I don't know. And then, as you had said, the long-term maintenance of the project is, if you and me get hit by a bus, we don't need to go in and have to worry about the devise. Somebody doesn't go in and try to tweak some devise app. If they've got a little bit of skill in authentication and Rails, they can go in and fix the widget or the bug.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think I'd rather, number one, just from a learning standpoint, since we're learning, I think devise or Auth from scratch is a better way to do it. And even if it wasn't a learning issue for us, I'm just I've been bitten in the butt more than once by using devise when it comes to things, and I'm sort of more on the side of just doing it from scratch. Usually there's nothing, there's no use case you can give me with regard to authentication usually that that you can't solve by doing it yourself. So I think
it doesn't. I get intimidated by this whole, like, the context of authentication, but this looks like, don't get me wrong, it's a Medium article, so I might be simplifying this much more than it is, but it doesn't look too challenging to be able to plug in. Right?
Yeah, no, it's really not. In fact, I'm hoping what we'll do. In fact, I would challenge you to do that sometime this week. Carve out an hour to walk through this, and it just in fact, I would just do it just like they're doing it. Create a new app from scratch.
Okay.
And then and just walk through this and go through it. And I'll do it too, because it's been a few years since I've done it. So
okay.
And I mean, the other thing is
So,
this.
so the question that I have for you is when you're doing something like this, so like after the fact, right? So if I have an app built and now it's to the point where, okay, I need some authentication, I've still got a user model already built. How does this come into, like, how do I move all this? Do I just go into my user model that's already built and plug in this has secure password and all those little things, or is there
Well,
something
so you
different?
wouldn't have, I mean,
Okay.
unless you've already got authentication in place, you probably wouldn't have a user model.
Okay.
Yes or
All right.
no?
So yeah, I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
just kind
no,
of
you
thinking.
you generally wouldn't. I mean, I mean, there's nothing special about the username. It's not a keyword or anything like that in Rails. But
Sure.
generally, you're only going to have that if you've got some form of authentication already
Okay.
in place.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
But
sense.
if you did for whatever reason, and I mean, like one common, one pretty common use case, or I should say, not so uncommon, would be I've got some other system that's got a user table in it, and I want to migrate that. I'm trying to import this into this new app, and
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody who had an account over there is going to need one in this new app. Well, in that case, right, I could just create a straight up user model, import it inside, inside just a straight Rails model, not authentication or anything. Just again, just essentially a database table that's got a username. Now you need to deal with the passwords and stuff like that. Generally, you're going to ask somebody to. In fact, I just did a project where we had a similar situation. Basically, you just ask everybody to reset their password because you've got an encrypted password over here.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
but to be honest, even in that case, I think you can, as long as you stay with the same hashing algorithm, the password will be valid on the other side. But yeah, you
Yeah, but
just
it's not
import it into a.
as yeah. It's just not as intimidating as I thought it would be.
No, yeah, once you take it apart, right, it's like a lot of things with web development, software development in general, is once you sort of dig into it, then it's actually not. Now it's a lot of moving parts to keep in your head, no doubt.
Sure.
But once you take it apart and look at the little bits and pieces of it, it's like looking at that 1,000-piece uh, puzzle on your table. The finished product looks pretty intimidating, but when you take it piece by piece, puzzle piece by puzzle piece, well,
Yeah.
it's just work. And so
It's just work, man.
yeah, it's just work.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Now
like it.
it can be a lot of work, but it's
Sure.
just
Sure.
work. So yeah, so let's plan on going with auth from scratch. Let's both of us set a goal, and like I say, I'll try and do it too. Let's work through this article. This is as good a place as any to start. We can go in and modify it some if we want, and then I think once we've both gone through this and we're comfortable with it, and it's just a sanity check to make sure this works too. I mean, again, this is just some Stack Overflow article that I found, but I mean, it all looks about right. I mean, I've got my Learning Rails 5 book here too, and I did a chapter on auth from scratch in it. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably sort of sanity check what I've got in my book compared to what he did here, but it all just looking at what he's got, it looks pretty similar to what I did. So I'm pretty sure
Awesome. Well, I'm
it's all going
excited.
to work.
I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, so let's do that. And then the other thing, then the next step, of course, and like another one, if you want to take it a step further, is to then maybe use scaffolding to create a task app similar to what we did, and then hide authentication hide the tasks behind authentication, right? The idea would be you've got a task app, and you can't view tasks until you actually log in. You can't create you can't create a task unless you're actually logged in or authenticated to the app.
Okay.
Okay.
sounds like just an hour or
Yeah,
so. Just bang it out real quick.
It's just work. Now it may take a dozen hours, or it may take 1 hour.
Yeah, sure.
That's
Right.
the difference in the Mark Zuckerbergs and
Yeah.
10x engineers versus the rest of us. But yeah, it's just work.
Yeah, it's just work.
Okay, cool. All righty. So Wednesday we'll finish up. I'll watch the other videos. Hopefully between now and then I'll lecture a little bit on that, and then maybe if we have time, maybe we'll walk through. Maybe we'll pair and walk through Rails through Scratch Live if not, let's try and set that as a goal for this
Awesome.
week, because I'd like the goal would be
Okay.
next week to actually start on the live app.
Sounds good. Appreciate
All right.
it.
All right, cool.
Well, good to see you, Mark. Yep.
Okay,
See you
see ya.
Wednesday. All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.